Philippine Press, its initial pages. The first Philippine newspaper was published in 1811. Del Superior Gobierno was established with the Spanish Governor-General himself as an editor. Its intended readers were local Spaniards, and therefore the content was primarily news from Spain. La Esperanza, in 1846, the first daily newspaper, it dealt with non-controversial subjects such as religion, science, and history. Diario de Manila, the best-edited newspaper, was suppressed by the Governor-General after 38 years of publication, allegedly for inciting the Filipino to rebel against the Spaniards. The history of the free press in the Philippines has its roots in nationalistic newspaper published in Spain and in Philippines during the Spanish colonial rule. The aim was to raise the level of consciousness with respect to oppressive conditions prevailing in the country. These newspapers were mainly published and written by the Ilustrados. La Solidaridad, the organization aimed to increase awareness of the needs of its colony, the Philippines, and to propagate a close relationship between the colony and Spain. Kalayaan served as the special organization of the revolutionaries. The use of the power of the pen by the early heroes proved the feasibility using nonviolent strategies for social and political reform. The American regime saw the introduction of the newspaper published mostly by the American journalists or the Manila Times in 1898, the Bounding Billow and the Official Gazette in 1898, Manila Daily Bulletin in 1900, and the Philippine Free Press. When World War II broke out, all the publications except those used by the Japanese were disbanded. Only Manila Tribune, Taleba, and La Vanguardia were allowed to publish under the regular censorship by the Japanese Imperial Army.
The Golden Age of the Philippine Journalism. The Golden Age of the Philippine journalism was happened in the year 1945 to 1972. It is the time of the post-war era to martial law time. Now, why does it was called the Golden Age? It was called Golden Age because it is a time of the presidency of late President Ferdinand E. Marcos. Now, the Philippine press during this time served as the watchdog of the government. It is also sensitive to the national issues and critical of the government mistakes and abuses. Now, there are some notable editors and journalists during this time, and some of these were Mauro Mendez, Arsenio Lacson, Modesto Farolan, Leon Guerrero, Armando Malay, S.P. Lopez, and Jose Bautista. Now, the Philippine press during this time was forced into what we call the marriage of convenience with large business enterprises and political groups. Most of the newspapers during this time were wholly or partly owned by the large businesses complexes. During the year 1952, the National Press Club was organized to promote cooperation among journalists and uphold press freedom and the dignity of the journalist. In the year 1964, the Philippine Press Institution, or the PPI, was organized to foster the government and improvement of the journalism in the country. The Margosiers are also known as the controlled and alternative press. The Margosiers was the martial law period. The martial law was, of course, declared by the late President Ferdinand E. Marcos on September 21, 1972. The government during this period have controlled and took over of all privately owned newspapers, magazines, radio stations, televisions, and all other media communications. They first arrested all editors and journalists during this period, and they were incarcerated them in military prison camps. After 1 month of proclamation of martial law, the government allowed to open only one newspaper, and this newspaper is called the Times Journal and was later known as the Establishment Press. But sooner, the government allowed the alternative press, and this alternative press are the Pahayagang Malaya, the Veritas, the Business Day, the Inquirer, the Mr. and Miss magazine. There are also journalism in colleges and colleges and universities, and some of the campus journalists are the Philippine Collegian of College of Diliman, the Ang Malaya of Polytechnic University of the Philippines, ang Pandayan ng Ateneo de Manila, ang Hasik of Pamantayan ng Lungsod ng Maynila, at ang Balawis ng Mapwa Institute of Technology. And during martial law period, there are some heroes that were struggled more against martial law or against Marcos. And one notable person and outstanding hero during among them is Mr. Joaquin Chino Roses. He was the publisher of the Manila Times, and he was regarded as the grand old man of the Philippines journalism.
The good news, because of the watchdog function in the government, it has resulted in frequent misunderstanding between the rulers. They even criticized newspapers for inaccurate and sloppy reporting, which leading to the filing of multi-million label cases against editors and journalists. The press regard the negative reports part of their watchdog function and consider libel suits as a serious threat to press freedom. Newspaper pages in these times have served as an effective forum for dialogue, both national and local news. It gives an opportunity for the aspiring journalist who investigates stories on corruption and graft in government, as well as the human rights and agrarian reform, especially the Marcos hidden wealth. These investigative stories leads to reducing abuses and corruption of the government. Many major business stories have given front-page treatment in depth articles and corporate gossips. In this time, the Manila-centric have featured more diverse stories from the regions beyond traditional natural and man-made calamities. However, the Philippine Press Institute, or PPI, conducts a dozen of training courses of newspaper publication. The Center for Media Freedom and Responsibility have also upgraded their professionalism on responsibility of media works through workshop and publications. Newspapers today at press in transition. There are a total of 14 national daily broadsheets and 19 tabloids published in Metro Manila. The two Filipino tabloids newspapers are Kabayan and Numero Uno. In these times, tabloids have claimed a higher circulation, and readers prefer this newspaper because it is written in a combination of English and Filipino, which introduces the most popular tabloid is Abante. There are also 5 Chinese broadsheets that publish in Binondo, Manila, namely Universal Daily News, China Times, World News, United Daily News, and China Commercial News. However, in these times, an example of provincial newspaper owned by single corporation is Sun Star. These provincial papers enable new owners to invest additional capital, acquire new printing equipment and facilities, and hire more editorial staff. Not just that, but it leads to compete with national in terms of editorial quality. Lastly, the most popular reading phase in this time is the illustrated comics, which features drama, love story, and horror. And magazine also have listed in media fact books such as gossip, hot copy, rumors, and etc.
If there is a good news in the history of Philippine press, there is also bad news. A common complaint against the press is alleged tendency to sensationalize and to focus on conflict situations. Sensationalism is defined as exaggerating on minor one as to create a startling or scandalous effect. Critics say that the press sort of is unwritten editorial policy in order to sell or increase their circulation and of course attract more advertisers. A related concern is lack of follow-up stories. Journalists themselves acknowledge that one of their serious problems is envelopmental journalism, practiced by some of their colleagues. Envelopmental journalism is envelopes with some money distributed to journalists in return for a favor to a positive or negative publicity. The Philippine Press Institute has adopted the Journalist Code of Ethics. The code provides, among the others, that journalists must adhere to scrupulous reporting or interpretation of news, not to suppress essential facts or distort the trust by improper omission or emphasis. But adherence to the code is voluntary and at best imposed through the Ombudsman and Press Council system. There is a need to improve the mechanisms for both. The other issues often raised focus on the quality of newspaper coverage of specific sectors, women, children, cultural communities, among others. The limited coverage tend to focus on conflict situations, tribal wars, calamities, drought and hunger, etc. Stories about their way of life are almost, although there is continuing attempt at preservation of their dances, songs, and ethnographic materials. The more visible cultural communities like the Igorots and various Muslim tribes are most apt to be stereotyped. From the underworld to computer age, challenges for the print media. Some are now automated from news sourcing and gathering, editing, layout, and design to production. Among highly automated newspapers are Business World, Philippine Daily Inquirer, Manila Bulletin. Using computers require continuing retooling among editors, journalists, and the production people. Some jobs may eventually have to be phased out as machines take over the work to be done or paced up. Some veteran journalists admit difficulty in adjusting as they miss the sounds of the typewriters. Many provincial newspapers are still in underwood age. Only the bigger provincial dailies such as the Sunstar Chain, the Freeman, Visayan Daily Star, to name a few, have access to more advanced technologies. Will newspapers eventually replaced by television and other new media, TV and internet as main sources of news? Not necessarily, according to the world trends in the newspapers industry, as reported in the National Daily recently. The report noted that the newspapers have a number of advantages. Some of the advantages is 1. Strong relationship with readers and advertisers, and 2. High degree of credibility. But the newspapers industry will continue to compete with television, cable TV, radio, and other media channels for advertising revenue. This would require more creative news packaging amidst threats of declining readers in favor of the visual media.
Now let's discuss about a newspapers. What is a newspapers? A newspapers is a form of printed media. It's a powerful mode of mass communication. It's a powerhouse in information that contains news from world of politics. It is a periodical publication. It could be daily or a weekly basis. It contains articles of opinions, features, advertisements, and information of public interest. And of course, a newspaper is a great source of information. There are two types of newspapers. We have the tabloids and a broadsheets. A tabloids is having the size half of the standard newspapers, typically popular in style and dominated by headlines, photographs, and sensational stories. And the main focus of the tabloid is to giving an entertainment to the masses. Now this is an example of a tabloid. Then we have here a broadsheet. A broadsheet is a long information article, an editorial comment, and comparably few illustration. It provides the readers with comprehensive coverage and analysis of international and national news of the day. So this is an example of a broadsheets. They are very different. The tabloid is size the half of a broadsheet. Now there are different parts of a newspaper. The first part of a newspaper is what we call a masthead or a nameplate. A masthead or a nameplate is the name of the newspapers. So whatever the names of the newspaper that you have read, that is what we call a nameplate or a masthead. So this is an example of a masthead or a nameplate. Philippine Daily Inquirer. Then we have the headline. The headline is the title of the story. So this is the headline. Next to headline is the byline. The byline is the name of the writer appearing in the article. So this is the byline. Then we have the deck. The deck is a secondary headline, a short sentence that follows the main headline and summarizes the article or the story. Actually, the deck is there only one or two sentences only because it's very comprehensive and descriptive information about the headlines. So this is the deck. Then after the deck, we have the lead. The lead is the first sentence of the story, informing the reader of how, what, when, where, or sometimes how and why. So this is the example of lead. The next to the lead is the jump line. The jump line is a line that tells the reader where to continue the story. So some of the newspapers, they put the end of the story right here. They put here continue reading to or continue to, something like that. But here, no, you cannot see. But here you can see like this. So this means that you're going to continue reading your story or the story, this one, in the A4 page. Then we have the graphic. The graphic is a combination of art and word, which helps to visually explain a story. So this is an example of a graphic. This one, and this one. Then we have the cut. The cut is a photo of illustration. It is called a photo of illustration. So this is what we call the cut. This photo. This one is the cut. Then we have the cut line. The cut line is a descriptive information about the photo. So it is also called a caption of the photo illustration. So if this is the photo illustration or the cut, this is what we call the cut line. This one right here. This one. This is a cut line. Then we have the photo credit. The photo credit is the reference to the source of a photograph. As you can see, this example, there's no reference they put in here. There's no reference at all. But also I give another example of a reference or a photo credit. This one is an example of a photo credit. This one, the reference for this photo. Another one we have here. This one. That one. That is a photo credit again. And the last one, we have the index. The index is an alphabetical list of the article or a table of contents. It could be subjects, names, persons, personal notices, advertisement, or any articles that is alphabetically in list. So this is an example of an index. This one, actually the index is written in bold text like this. This one, another here, this one, and this one. There's a lot of index here. And I think that's all for the newspapers and the parts of the newspapers. Thank you.
Let's proceed to the newspaper section. There are 11. First, the general news section. This is usually the most important news in both local and abroad. This is usually found on the front page of the newspaper. The title of the news is printed in big, bold letters called the banner. Here, this is the general news section. Now let's proceed to the second section, which is the local and foreign news section. It contains news from towns and cities from abroad. Here, second page, we can find the local and news section. Here. Now, let's proceed to the third one, which is the editorial page. Editorial page contains articles called editorials. Editors gives views and opinions of the editor or publish on certain issues or events. Here. Most newspapers, as you can see, have editorial banner for the editorial page. Here. This is an example of the editorial page. Now let's proceed to the sports page. This section contains news on events containing sports from in and out of the country. This section also contains well-known people in the sports world. For example, this. The same with the editorial page, it has banner written sports in here. You can easily identify editorial page and sports page because of its banner. Here. Now let's proceed to the fifth one, which is the classified ads section. It contains advertisements that fall under the categories like help, wanted, for lease, for sale, and wanted to buy. Here is the classified ads. As you've noticed, classified ads. As you can notice here in the classified ads, there is numbers of the employers, which you can call if you want to be employed, or if you want to apply in a certain job. Now for the sixth one, which is the business and finance section. It contains businessmen and people who are interested in business with information on banking, foreign exchange rates, imports and exports, and prices of the common commodities. For example, since I don't have a newspaper example, I have here a printed one. This. Now let's proceed to the entertainment section. It contains info about movies, radio, television, and other activities for entertainment. Here, the same with the sports section. It has banners on it, so you can easily identify. This is the entertainment section. As you notice, the content of this is more on celebrities, artists. Here. Now let's proceed to the home and culture section. It provides info about budgeting, food preparation, house improvement, and etc. Here I have an example which is entitled The Determination at Mga Kaibigang Kaagabay sa Pag-unlad. Now for the society page. It contains news about important people who are celebrating special events in a particular place or anything about society's news. For example, here I have here entitled 2 NPA, 1 soldier killed in a clash. This is the society page. Now let's proceed to the travel and tourism section. It contains a guide to travel and direct tourists to scenic vacation spots and gives information on the activities in this place, just like this. Manila Bulletins, Travel and Tourism, a Secret Garden. Here. Now for the last one, which is the announcement and obituary pages. It provides information about the activities of different religious sections and also for the list of people who recently died and the time and place of their burials. That's all. Thank you.